Everybody's here.
Then I think everybody's here. Okay. And we are now recording.
Okay.
So, for anybody who is watching this later, this is our first attempt at a hybrid in-person and Zoom meeting. Thanks to Brad Hart and his owl. When you turn it on, by the way, it goes, woo-hoo.
Oh, does it really? I thought I looked at it.
It's a really nice
Yeah.
camera image. It's a nice image, so you can see everyone. So, yeah.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Just for your reference, there's all sorts of settings, but if you see what the participants are seeing with our split screens, that's a panorama
Right at
across
the
the
top.
top, so everybody can see the whole room.
Oh,
You can turn that off. Some people don't like it, but most of my attendees said, oh, I like it because I can see the whole room. And then, of course, as you see when we speak, it turns to you.
And the other thing it does, you might have seen it when Linda got up to use her computer. If I'm talking and I stand up and I start moving, if I keep talking, it eventually comes to find me.
Yeah.
See, I'm behind. It moves around with you. So it can
And there's
find
even-
that's great.
There's even a presenters mode.
Yeah.
So if you're like in a classroom setting with boards, it will stay focused on you and follow you as you walk back and forth instead of the rest of the audience if they make noise. So there's multitudes of, like anything else, there's not one way to do it. There's 3,000 ticks and checks and settings.
Yeah, the only issue that we found initially is if we're not starting yet and, people are talking to each other. If you're watching, you can't hear anything. It's garbled.
Mhm.
But once you go to individuals, like we are now, it's been
Very clear.
really clear.
Okay, so moving on to STR stuff. We're kind of at the end of our time period to finalize things and decide what kind of suggestions we want to make to the council in July. So that gives us just basically a month to put together a presentation to the council at the workshop and be able to answer questions. So in order to do that, we've now got a plan. We've got a couple of options for the whole city, either the 17.5% or a capped number, or 17.5% with a limit that would trigger a review. So we're kind of done with that whole city portion, and now we need to get to the neighborhood, which thanks to Phil, we're not calling density because density is too many things. We're calling it proximity. So it's how many houses is the maximum, how many SDR homes is the maximum that can surround my house that I would feel that that's okay. That's just a part of living in a resort town of Manzanita. And we've discussed it, we've talked about it, we've come up with some different ideas, and the last one we kind of discussed in length. I'm hoping that we can just come to a conclusion that, yes, that will work. Talking with Patrick the other day, he said, what's the best way to explain it to everybody else? And I'm gonna try a way to explain it that if we can all agree, yeah, that's a good way to explain it. Yes, that'll work. The mechanics of it come later. How do we make it easy for the city? And we have a program that'll do that, but there's some questions about how big it should be, but let me try to explain it. If I am a house, if I live in a house, then what SDRs affect STRs? What STRs are gonna have a big effect on my livability? And it's definitely the house to either side of me. It's probably also the house next to that. And then in front of me, across the street, it's gonna probably be an array of houses in my line of sight. So it's probably about 5 houses in my line of sight. And then behind me in my backyard, it's probably the same array of around 5 houses. Now, some of those might be empty lots. Some of those might be double lots.
Mhm.
Maybe it'll be the ocean. But when I'm sitting in my house, it's that array in front of me, the array behind me, whatever is there,
Mhm.
and 2 each
Right.
side. And so that's about, if you have a neighborhood that's all built up and has the standard 50 by 100 lots that we have in Manzanita, it's gonna be about 15 homes. It's not always gonna be 15 homes, because sometimes you might have the state park, you might have the ocean, you might have a double lot, you might have an empty lot, whatever. But again, that's the array that's gonna affect me. And so what we talked about in that array is the maximum amount of homes that we would feel comfortable being STRs. And that number that we've been talking about is 5 STRs out of those 15 homes. That's the maximum. Carol added that when we talk about those 5 STRs, it does make a difference whether it's a 1-bedroom house or a 5-bedroom house.
Correct.
And so one option would be, and I think we all kind of agreed on this, but we'll check with everybody, is that if it's a 5-bedroom or more home, it counts as 2 STRs.
I think that's good.
I think even smaller than that, maybe 4 bedrooms,
I think
Would be
there's too many for,
8, it would be 8 plus 4, so it would be at least 12. 12, any home having more than 12
I think that's,
guests.
I think, yeah, I think,
Didn't we talk about the 4-bedroom being 1.5? So not a full 2 that we talked
no,
about?
we didn't.
If a house sleeps 12,
Or
12.
Yeah, it's
By
hard-
by
okay.
the standards, then it would be 1.5.
1.5. is that
And a
what
mega
it is?
house, or I don't know what you want to call it, was 2. That's how I remember it, but I don't think we decided.
We didn't, but
We
yeah,
didn't
let's,
finally, no.
So
I thought that was for an occupancy discussion.
no, well, that was for occupancy discussion, but then we were talking about in terms of the 5 in the halo, if it was 5 bedrooms or more, it would be double. And I don't think we can
2
do
dogs.
halves in the halo. It just gets to,
Yeah,
you know, how do you do a half a
Keeping
home?
it simple would be nice.
Go ahead, Phil.
Are we talking about bedrooms and sleeping rooms?
Yes. We were talking about occupancy.
Okay, so we're
Which
talking
I
about
know isn't-
bedrooms and.
Let me see if I can answer that for you. A sleeping room, according to the definition,
Yeah, I've got it right here.
okay, read it, because that'll help us. It
Okay,
has to have a door in the first place.
fully. Well, I wonder about that
Well,
because it says fully enclosed habitable space with a heat source and an emergency egress or rescue opening. That could be a window
correct.
meeting the minimum standards of the current Oregon Residential Specialty Code. I don't know what that is.
Well, this is something that Lee Hilton Brand put in there, because Lee used to be a building inspector for Cortland.
Yeah.
And the reason it's worded that way, as I remember from our work group, is that he wanted to be very clear that it does not mean a living room with a sofa bed. It has to have a door, and that's what the definition, if you look enclosed, fully enclosed.
Mm.
So you
And
have
that's
to be
what,
able
if you go
close
to the
door.
specialty
So in other
code,
words,
So loft is
the
not.
wording that Lee came up with then excludes the capability of putting in a hide-a-bed or a Murphy bed in a living area and.
correct, because it can't, yeah, it's generally not fully, the fully enclosed means a door.
Just one comment on the egress. I know because one of my neighbors, who I know the owners, is an STR. They previously had 3 bedrooms. One of the small bedrooms was designed to be a laundry room. They put bunk beds in for kids, and the window in that room is like this. With that new rule, or I don't know if it's a new rule, but regarding egress, the last time Scott came in to do an inspection, he said you cannot rent this house with that
Correct.
bedroom open. So they've had to put a lock
oh,
on that bedroom so it can't be used because there's not an egress window.
And that's the second part of this. It says
Now, if
if
they're
it is
staying
not.
there themselves with their kids, they open it up and the kids sleep in there.
Yeah, and that's the second part of the code is, it says if it is not fully enclosed and if it is not, it doesn't have an egress, if it doesn't meet the code, in other words, it must be locked before you rent it out.
closed off.
Okay.
What's an egress, you guys?
Egress,
Exit
Oh,
fire.
it
Yeah.
means there are certain standards that if the window in a room's this
48
big,
inches.
you can't get out of it. So
Oh, it's
egress
really-
means there's a certain size
48 inches.
to be able to escape. It could be, like my bedroom, we've got a door to the outside, so that's considered
Right.
egress. But like on the top floor,
Right.
when we remodeled, we had to change the window out to make it bigger. And instead of like this, like that, so someone could escape.
We
I
did the
think.
same thing. We had to lower the window because it has to be, I think,
Interesting.
lower to the ground, so it's a way out.
And you have to be able to get
But
out.
I have a question on that enclosed, so that would mean a loft area is not a sleeping area.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That would
that's
be
correct.
Okay,
yeah.
I just
but
wanted to.
So long as the code is enforceable by max, I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
And I think that should relieve your concern with regards to packing a house.
Right.
But would this impact, I'm new to this, so if I'm asking stupid questions, just say, psh. But if that house, for example, that I was talking about has 2 bedrooms and 2 adults can sleep in each one, that's 4.
Right.
Is there anything to prevent them from stacking 6 kids like cordwood in the living room? So then you've got,
Because the living room
you're-
can't be closed
Well,
off.
see, but that.
but
the-
is there something within the rules that says
Yes,
this house can
yes.
only be occupied
no.
by 4 people?
So you could put someone in the loft, but you would have to stay within the limits of the occupancy. And again, the way it works is 2 per bedroom. It currently reads 2 per bedroom plus 4.
Yeah.
So you could have 4 people sleeping in the loft,
Right.
but the occupancy of the house is based on the bedrooms.
Okay, so.
So where do they sleep?
Oh, wait.
So then-
And they
so-
could sleep in the loft.
so
It doesn't
then
say you can't sleep in the loft. It just says you can't count it in your occupancy numbers of bedrooms.
See, I think
Okay.
that's confusing.
That is confusing.
Can I just interrupt for a quick second?
I don't want to get into this.
Let's
Yeah.
let Patrick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Patrick.
So if we can just take a step back for a second and think about this big picture and think about where we are and what we have left to do. We're almost a half hour through this. We've got 90 minutes left. And this is kind of our opportunity to kind of close up our presentation, the themes for our presentation I guess it's next month. We want time to be able to write this up. And just big picture, I think there's kind of 4 parts to this. And we've already done education and communication. We've already, the city's already established enforcement and tracking. We've already finished the citywide cap, and we have one last piece, and that's kind of our first attempt at setting up a control for neighborhood density using proximity. And I would just say this: if we really do want to accomplish this today, so that we can work on this for the city council, I would suggest that we keep it simple and we recognize one thing, like what we have in place is a huge improvement on what we had. It'll be very useful to take this basic things that are in place and see over 12 to 18 months how well this has worked. And we're going to find that I think that what we've done is amazing. I'm nervous that we're going to get bogged down today and maybe in the next meeting over details that are not going to impact our ability to just put together a simple control, because we have a citywide control now. It can't get too big for the city. And now we have the ability to do the second aspect, which is let's put something in place to put, for the first time ever, a little bit of control in a neighborhood. And if we do that by creating this little halo, and we do that such that a new STR has to be able to, cannot go into an extremely dense area in terms of proximity, I think we've made a huge step. And I think we can look at that and we can separate occupancy from proximity. And I think we want to do this in a measured and smart fashion. We want to keep these simple and keep the concepts separate. That's my 2 cents, and I'll cede my time.
Thanks. And I agree. Let's get back to that. I think that, is it a sleeping room? Where can the loft, that will be under occupancy and we can get to that. But if we can say, does this halo work for everybody? Is 5 the right number? Then we can get to the next steps of that, but we first need to focus on that.
And the halo is based on this being a full-time residence.
No, the halo is based on this being, if you want to, thanks for asking, because we do need to clarify that. If you want your house to become an STR, you would go to the city and you would apply. And first the city would say, okay, do we have room on the overall waiting list, whether that's a hard cap or whether that's a percentage?
Is there one available is first?
Is there one available? And then the next question would be, okay, where you want to put it, is it already too dense in terms of proximity
Proximity to other STRs.
to other
Other
SDRs?
STRs.
And
Okay.
Brad, we're gonna go into this after this meeting,
Well,
really
yeah, but
detailed.
it's good for the,
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it needs to stay with the committee. I think that's
Okay.
really important.
so you would go, you would say, here's my house, can I be an STR? And then the city would use a computer program, which we'll show you later. And they would do that little halo and they would look at the radius,
Approximately
yeah,
15.
approximately 15. And they would say, are there already 5? Are there only 3? Are there 7? If there's 7, through attrition, eventually we're gonna get back down to the 5. But if there's only 4, yes, they could become an SDR. If there's already 5, no, they couldn't. So can we get an agreement? We'll talk about the big homes in just a second, but can we get an agreement that about 15 homes in that little circle, or about, how much, Patrick and I have had discussions where we can't figure out, is that 100 feet or it's 150 feet? Doesn't matter. We both agree, and do you count the lots or do you count the dots on the homes? It doesn't matter. The question is, in that approximate area, that it's approximately 15 homes in a standard lot size area, can we agree on 5 SDRs being the max for any given area in town, except commercial? We'll talk about that in a minute. Can we all agree to that? Is there anybody that?
I would be comfortable with that as a starting point and then assessing that over time, with the help of council to see, if this is working, because this is one of the things that, one of the issues that comes up is what happens if HOAs eliminate STRs, and there's this huge flow from, uphill all the way down into our quiet neighborhoods. Like, this is a great control for something like that.
No,
So, but
Yeah.
I think what Patrick said initially is right on. Let's
Yes.
just stick to what we want to take to the.
council
To
in
the
July,
council,
and of
yeah.
course, the council is gonna look at everything down the road and say, does this work? I think we just acknowledge
Well,
that.
and the other thing, I, as a council person, I think Brad would agree with me. I give you leeway to make a mistake. I mean, it's okay if a year from now we've decided really it should be 6 homes in that group.
Or
it
3
should be
homes
3
or
homes in
whatever,
that group.
yeah.
So this is a starting point. Let's not get, so it doesn't have to be perfect.
I also think it's important to remember that this is in relationship to the first overall city goal of a percentile or a cap.
Right.
Correct, it's
So
secondary.
what this is designed to do is look at the proximity issue in a part of the bigger.
Okay, so are you good with it?
I'm good with it as long as we keep this 15 homes kind of thing, because what was concerning to me is when we played with the parameters, you got down to like 8 homes, or, I mean, it didn't play, it seemed like it was little chunks here and there, where I think if we say we're gonna shoot for the halo to be about 15, whatever the square footage, whether it's 100 feet, 150 feet, then I think 5 is an appropriate number.
Okay, does that acknowledge that if you live next to the state park and there's nobody behind you, there's not gonna be 15 homes around you because there's nobody on one side?
I think that's a little problematic, that I don't know if we want to have that discussion today. I think I don't know if we agreed on this, that if you live next to unincorporated Manzanita, we can still have the halo go over there because we can get the data from the county, right?
Right,
So then it's the beach, it's gonna create a cluster.
it's the beach in the park.
The beach
basically.
in the park is still, I don't know how, I think we should look at that in real time with the map and see if that works.
Okay, so let's leave it at that for just a
Okay.
second.
Annapona's got a hand.
Thank you. Go ahead, Anupam.
That's just Michael.
Yeah, thanks. I think, first of all, I agree with Patrick. I think let's keep it simple in terms of recommendations to the council. I think there are many, many issues, just like we're talking right now, underneath that concept of five. And I'm certainly can be supportive of the five, recognizing that we have a lot more work to do in defining what that means and the consequences of that, whether it be occupancy or whether it be bordering the beach or the park or whatever else it might be. And then another part of it is, what if you're bordering the commercial area? So one side is not count and the other side does. So there are many issues to be dealt with, but we'll deal with those issues later on. But right now, conceptually, we're saying is, as a notion, let's stick with five. And we may
Okay.
revise it in the future, that's it.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, I guess I would just, as I was thinking about it, over the past week or so, whether we do 5 and 15 or 3 and 12 or 4 and 12, whatever it is, I wasn't really gravitating towards one or the other, but, hearing, I know Cheryl just brought it up briefly, but that there's still some technical challenges when you're abutting, the beach or state parks or, whatever's behind you that isn't houses. And I think the 5 and 15 does a better job at addressing that because it casts a little bit wider net. And so, like, if there was something that would tip me one way or another, that seems like a good reason to do 5 and 15. The other thought I had too, just as far as making a policy recommendation that's defensible, is that stating the obvious, we have an aggregate limit of licenses citywide, and then we also have something that we're trying to address, whether we call it density or proximity at a neighborhood level, and we're trying to bust these clusters up. And this policy does a really good job of it at it. And when we look at which neighborhoods had higher density, I don't know if that's the word we're going to use, but the 5 and 15 seem to align with what's out the window right now, which is starting to seem like maybe the upper bounds of a neighborhood's appetite for SDRs in them. So I think the 5 and 15 gets there at kind of that more granular level, whereas the limit that we'll have citywide addresses that. So what else am I saying? Other than I'm supportive, 515 makes sense, both as the size of the net that we're casting and as a specific percentage at a street or neighborhood level.
Carol?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, me, thinking about consequences. I am thinking about the unintended consequences of that could possibly, I totally support the idea of keeping it simple, but I think we do have to think about the unintended consequences of how five, if you were in a area that had 5 homes, what would happen or what would be the result of that? And one of the things that I have been worried about is that people's property values would drop as an unintended consequence. So just to be thinking of that. If you're in an area, you've got 5 rentals right around you. One person was not a rental, they might have a lot of trouble selling their home or sell it at a lower rate.
It's an
Would be
interesting
kind of a-
concept because I've heard that and I've also heard the opposite. If we don't STRs, property values will drop because you
Yes.
can't use your home as a short-term
Yes.
rental. So it's kind of an interesting, who knows
Yes.
what's the actual truth.
I mean, I think that's one of those things we watch for.
Yeah.
You need to watch for.
Yeah, and I
Exactly.
think that's a really good point. I also think the state park and the ocean is something we should watch for.
The
and
border issues.
Yeah, the border issues, because those are things we just don't know
Yeah.
now, but there are things to
Yeah.
keep our
And we
eye.
may decide to factor that in some way as a +1 or something, but the other thing here is I
Yeah.
think when I get into worrying about those particulars, I find that I've forgotten that we already have a citywide control
Yes.
measure.
Right.
And so, because if you just thought of it as 5 and 15, boom, 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 everywhere 5 and 15, then it can seem like, oh my gosh. But if we think of our citywide cap or numerical cap percentage, how that's regulated us fairly well
Mhm.
based on survey results. Now, this step, this proximity, is to help us kind of manage the movement of those. And there are going to be neighborhoods now that, we looked at the map, there's 7 or 8 right there, that,
Mhm, right.
So I'm thinking that with the city cap, the 5 maybe will help us with distribution rental. But we need to watch.
That would be the
Yeah.
hope.
That would be the hope.
That will
That's-
help.
That's
And
the
again,
intended
that would
goal,
This
but
is
you're right.
not
I
a-
don't
Yeah,
know.
this is not a,
Right.
let's make this a rule for the next 50 years.
Right.
Thank God.
And that's the good news.
She
Phil?
actually answered my question
Okay.
before I posted. What I was gonna bring up was the fact 5 out of 15, you're looking at 33% saturation.
Right,
Yeah.
but you're not.
But it's
Yeah.
not
Not
5 out of
citywide.
15.
You answered.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
not.
So because you,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
but that question is gonna come up because somebody's gonna say,
Absolutely.
so we have to be thinking further on, not now, but further on down the
Right.
line, justifying that 5 out of 15.
Well, and you have to
Works.
explain that to council.
and again, and that's, yeah, and we do, and so that needs to be in the presentation, and we need to say it a million different ways. This is the max in any one little area, but we will still have a citywide
But that's where the
Number.
hard cap comes in.
That's where the hard cap
or,
comes
Yeah.
in.
or a hard percentage, or
Whatever.
either way.
But if there are 5 within that 15,
Mhm.
it's gonna affect the property values. I just, and there might be other unintended consequences, like the traffic, like the people coming and
Let's-
going,
yeah, but yes,
that are.
Yeah, and we'll look at that,
That
and
need
that's,
to be looked
that's
at
why this
by the
committee
city
won't
council.
end in July.
Yes, I just want to throw that out there,
Yeah,
so
no,
it's
yeah,
on the
Well,
record.
and to Carol's point, and to Cheryl's, I think in the recommendation to council, we ought to recommend that they do another, that the STR committee do another survey at some
Oh,
1 year, 2 year to figure out. if
Check in.
those- Yeah.
Yeah,
just check
how we
in.
doing?
Yeah, it's a fluid,
May I add something?
sure.
Um, first of all, I'm fine with the 5, as I said before. I would drop the concept of 15. Please don't call it 5 and 15. It's just, our recommendation is we won't have a maximum of 5. There are many things to be talked about in terms of how that might affect it, etc. But leave it at that. Don't get into 5 and 15. Drop the
Halo.
15 from now on, okay?
I agree, because you're talking about what affects me in my home. Well, if I've got 5 empty lots in front of me, they don't affect me. And so should we add 15 more on some other street? No,
Right.
they don't affect me.
No, I really
It's
agree
not,
with that.
it's a halo.
Can
I-
I,
Good point.
and I would also maybe like Joe just kind of phrase it a little differently, and I would not phrase it in terms of like how many around my house affect me. I would think of this totally differently, and I would think of this number one, starting from where we all began, which is our citywide cap, which has served us very well to this point, and it's going to continue to serve us well, and we're on top of that. And now what this is, it's not about how many houses are in my neighborhood, in my opinion. This is a way to fix one thing that the citywide cap couldn't do, and that couldn't break up clusters that formed over time. And that's all this is this is a long-term process, because you have to wait till houses sell or people give up their MCA license. This is a 5 to 10 year process that breaks up clusters that have formed over time and protects neighborhoods against future clusters. So this isn't a way to measure neighborhoods density or anything like that. So this is really it's a tool to help the citywide cap that we've established and ensure that clusters don't form or that existing clusters get broken up over the coming years. And I think if we think about it that way, I think it's easier to present than a concept of we're measuring neighborhoods or houses around us, because that's not really what it's for. It's just a new tool that helps with clusters that exist or could potentially form that we've never had a protection against.
Yeah, that,
Okay, so let's move on from that. I think we've all got agreement. We'll use this concept. We'll use the number 5 in our Halo, whatever that works out in the computer program, and we'll work with Brian on that to make it as easy as possible for the city. Okay, so the things left that we need to add to this, I'm just gonna go through them and then we'll talk about one at a time. One is the beach and the park. In other words, if there's nothing on one side of you, how do we deal with that? The second is if you abut a UGB, do we count the UGB homes? The third one is the commercial and the R4 zones. Do we make them the same, that we want the same 5? Or do we say no, in those 2 zones, which have never historically been capped, do we want to continue to let them grow as quick as they want? But then the fourth one is if you live in the R3 zone, which about butts the R4 zone, when you count your 5, do you count the homes in the R4 zone? Okay,
In the R4?
in the R4
Yeah.
zone. If you live in the R3 zone, and if you live across the street from Michael,
Mhm.
Michael lives in R4.
Mhm.
Across the street from Michael is R3.
Mhm.
If you want to
Mhm.
have an STR across the street from Michael, do you count
Mhm.
in your halo the homes in the R4, or do you make a half halo? And the same thing is for the park and for the, so it's 2 opposites. One is if nobody's across from you,
Right.
and the other is if a whole lot of homes are across from you. I'll get you in a sec, Patrick. I'm just gonna give you my opinion first, because
Cause you're chair.
I'm the chair. It is, a halo is a halo, an STR is an STR. If there's nothing across the street from you, like a park or an ocean, then it doesn't affect you. And so there can be 5 other homes around you because you got nothing on one side of you. If you live across from a UGB or an R4 zone, well, an STR is an STR. They affect you. So they should be counted. So we should count the UGBs. We should count the R4. I also say, let's not cap the commercial and the R4, let's let them continue to grow. So that's just my vote, and what I'd like to do is go around and get as simply as you can. What's your vote? Patrick, you've had your hand up for a while, so go ahead.
Let's see. I mean, I can go either way on the UGB. So I think the key part of this, and what answers like 90% of this, is if we can all come to terms with that, we focus on the applicant for a new short-term rental, and we do a halo around it, and we count what's in that halo. If we can focus on that, then 80% of these things are taken care of, and we can walk away from most of this. Because if we do it that way, we're include in that halo can be the ocean, it can be the state park, it can be an R4, it can be a C1, it can be an R3, because all we're doing is we're looking at this circle around a prospective applicant, and we're saying how many short-term rentals are there over or under 5. And we just keep it simple, because what this does over 5 or 10 years is, as we do this and it hits every different part of the city, it slowly breaks up clusters, and that's what this is intended to do. So the only other issue that's outside of that is, and once again, if you're applying in the C1 zone, then you have basically an exemption. In the C1 zone, if you want to be in the C1 zone, you don't do a halo. You get to do as many as you want in the C1 zone. So that's where I would start.
What about R4 zone?
Like, can we do that last, if you don't mind? Like, let's try to agree on the simple part.
Okay, so yes to the C1, you're holding off on your R4.
so yes to including it or not?
He's yes to not including it, yes to letting them have as many homes as they want, that right? In the C1? In C1, okay.
I'll add LC.
Yeah,
Those 2 together.
I consider it part of C1, even though it's not, yeah. It's hotels. Carol,
Is
you
anybody
want to?
against that?
let's,
Nope,
Nope.
I'm against it.
Oh, okay.
I'm against, I guess I'm against it too. I think we should keep our commercial, I don't think we should fill up our commercial zones with STRs. That's what I think. I think that's where our businesses are. And if we fill it up with STRs, a hotel is different. But with the STR, any property could become,
let me,
Just-
there's two, I think it's two different issues.
okay,
One is building a home that's an STR on Laneta. The second one is if there is a home, or if you build a home, are there more than 5 around you? There aren't, if you look at the C1 zone, there aren't that many opportunities. I mean, you'd have to tear down a whole bunch of
correct.
commercial buildings to build SCRs, and that won't pencil out for anybody. But there's two issues of, do we want in the commercial zone and L1, do we want to allow the proximity to be more than 5? Not, do we want to have all of Lanita be short-term rental homes? So can you see the difference?
So the grid basically, again, goes back to the grid should apply.
You're saying the grid should apply?
Yeah.
Okay, Phil?
Yeah.
The only thing I was gonna say was, is in the LC and the C1 zone, I think the property value is pretty much gonna determine what gets built there.
Right.
I
Yeah,
can't foresee somebody shelling out $250,000 to $300,000 for a lot in order to build an STR on.
exactly.
No.
Yeah.
It isn't-
I agree.
it isn't-
But,
it isn't
yeah,
penciled out.
and that, I think that's a separate issue, but talking proximity, how do you feel about C1 being included in the proximity limits versus not being included and allowed to have a higher percentage?
I would again go back to what each one of these zones are trying to establish by definition regarding
mhm.
R4, LC and LC1,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, C1. And to just add a comment, I agree with the idea. I don't have a vote here, but I think it's important that you take into consideration if your residence abuts the urban growth boundary, I think you have to take into consideration what goes on in that neighborhood. I think you have to cross that zone in order to determine it, because it's going to directly affect what your neighbors are going to
Sure.
feel across the street from you
Exactly.
within Manzanita.
Right.
So I think as I say, I don't have a vote.
But
So
you have
you're
a
saying-
voice.
Went
But you
that
have a
way.
You have a
voice.
voice. So you're saying,
voice.
so you're
We
saying
appreciate it.
UGBs should be in the halo. If you live, if you abut a UGB, your halo should include the UGB. It shouldn't just cut off
Yeah.
at the edge.
Yeah, because I
Okay.
think it
Mhm.
affects your
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Right.
Absolutely, okay.
Right.
And in the commercial zone and the L1 and the R4, because of the zoning, you're saying in those neighborhoods, we should or should not use the proximity halo?
I would go back to the definition of what C1,
Right,
LC, and R4 are. And,
Right.
you know,
They're commercial.
it's primarily a commercial
suffer.
thrust
Right.
and a more compact living situation than an R3, and most certainly an R2.
Right.
So again, I want a clear, yes, we should apply the
I don't have a
proximity or
vote.
no. I'm an opinion. I'm not a vote. I'm just,
My opinion is that we should allow the LC1, the C1, and the R4 to develop naturally.
okay. That, I just wanted to get clear in my head.
But you-
But it's not a vote. We're not voting anyway right
But
now.
that's your opinion.
That's your opinion.
Yeah.
Michael?
Well, it's boy, jumping around a whole lot there. I want to make sure, I don't know, do you have a checklist in front of you, Joe, to make sure I don't Like that we can at least go around to the committee and say, answer this, yes, no, yes, no. Do you have something like that
I do.
in your notes or whoever's taking notes? No? You got it. Okay. Okay, perfect. So let's see, try to keep with the natural flow of things. So R3, the catchment area should consider what's in R4.
Okay.
So that's my thought there, to protect the character of R3. I think, you know, as far as what's in the UGB, there's STRs licensed in the UGB. I initially was going to say no, that we shouldn't count those, but you know, somebody could make a compelling case. I'm just a little bit concerned with the complexity over it. I'm assuming the city has a joint management agreement with the county on other things, implementing zoning and what have you. And so if we can tie it to something like that, I would say, yeah, just to make sure that we resolve that complexity. So yes, with the asterisks there. And what's left? R4 and C1?
Yeah.
Is it?
There's one to in a minute. Yeah, but let's do these three first.
Okay.
The R4C1 proximity. Should there be a limit, or should they allow to develop naturally?
You know, with what we have, like with what the guidance that we have right now, that's in the zoning and, you know, comp plan designation, what have you. I think it can be, you know, fair game, no proximity limits. And I think that there should be a note in our, you know, report that we supply to council that says, you know, the caveat being when or should the city, you know, develop an overlay or mixed use or additional guidance that prioritizes other uses than STRs, whether it's protecting commercial retail space or office space or protecting long-term rentals. I mean, but that would have to happen first, unless somebody can point to that guidance right now. But I think that's more than just STRs. I think that would be just the development of single family homes in general, or anything that isn't mixed use, right? So you commercial on bottom, or retail on bottom, you know, garden apartments on top, right? So that would be the threshold, but I don't think we have anything like that at the moment. So with the guidance that we have in the zoning that we have, while, you know, my values, you know, my value judgment might be elsewhere, but with the guidance that's on the books right now, I don't think we can really deviate from that. So
You're basically saying the same thing Phil is saying. The
Yeah.
zoning leads it to unfetteredness. Yeah.
right. And I don't think that's ideal. But if that's why I think we should, you know, in the report, you know, say, you know, future policies should consider any updated zoning comp plan designation, or, you know, overlay, you know, whatever it is, the city's tool at guiding land use development in this area, future policy should consider. So, and that may be very near term. I don't know what outcomes of the comp plan update will be, but it might be a more heavy-handed approach to ensure that we don't have single family development eating up the very few commercial land that we have in our city.
Yeah, we try to meet it, but it could, and we should consider it. Do, Cheryl. I'm sorry.
Nice to meet you. I think we ought to leave I'm pretty quick and easy with just one drawback. I think the commercial zone should be left as it is now.
Okay.
I think R4 should be able to be considered by R3s for the reason you said, and STRs and STR. I think UGB should be considered STRs if they're right there. But I also think if you are a beachfront home or you border the park, the beach or the park should count as one. Otherwise, we're going to create clusters on the beachfront and potentially on the park front. And I think that Because if you look at what the Halo does in every other neighborhood, it will incorporate 3 to 5 homes probably on the backside, on one side. And by eliminating that, you've taken away a third, roughly, of the homes that are considered other places. And in terms of all things being equal, I wouldn't add 5, but just if you were on beachfront, you have 1, or if you're next to the park, you have 1, and then you do your Halo. So in effect, the Halo is 4.
Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. Okay.
It's
Just a
interesting.
clarification question, if we were talking about this house, that's not the beach or a park, would you consider this one?
What is that?
Behind us?
It's an empty
common
land.
ground.
Is it,
Green space.
is it owned by private people?
It is.
Then I would consider it. I'm talking about if you have a.
Although
ocean-
that's the park. That's the park. So
Okay,
my
if-
outside
If you're
limit,
behind the
yeah.
park, then you take it into consideration. If it's land that can be
Built
developed
on.
in the future, then
Right.
Then.
Yeah, which is,
Yeah.
again, kind of a judgment call for the city, which makes it a little more
Yeah.
complicated, but I
But
want
I think
to,
those situations are not that frequent. I mean, I think it's pretty cut and dry. If you're on the beachfront, you're on the beachfront. If you are directly across
From
the
the state
border,
park,
the
there-
state park, you're directly across.
Right.
I want
don't
to, I
it's
think,
fuzzy. Maybe up
think
here.
we can, Carol, if you can get behind the R4C1 being by zone, a denser district, and therefore not limit them in terms of proximity. I think everybody else agrees with that, which is not to say.
Which is fine.
Which is, yeah, and it's not to
Yeah.
say that we should turn downtown Laneda into short-term rentals, because again, that's not what the zoning is, it's commercial.
Yeah, I
So-
am aware.
We were going to go around the room. I've been waiting. I don't know if you still want to do it.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Couple of thoughts. First of all, I thought we were finished with the conversation at 5, but then we were going to say there were many other issues to be dealt with, and we're going to deal with that subsequently. But are we now getting into a conversation about trying to make decisions on all of those items? How the park, the beach, the zones, all these things, is that part of the agenda then as part of the recommendation? Okay, so I misunderstood. So
Yeah.
second thing is I would like to be asked for us to be cautious a little bit. We shouldn't let the tail wag the dog. I heard talk about, oh, let's change the zoning in the city of Manzanita to accommodate STRs. Change the zoning in future policies about commercial, this, that, etc. You know, we have to sort of have I guess, be careful about what we're trying to achieve. And it's a problem that we may see today. In 5 years, 3 years from now, it may not be an issue at all. So let's stay focused. So my view, at least, is I would let the commercial be, I think Phil and somebody else, Michael said, let be the way it is. I would let R4 be the way it is. And the decisions about the park, how to deal with the park, the ocean, UGB, adjacent to commercial, I don't know. I need to have more of a conversation on that, understand what's happening, what's out there. I'm not prepared to say one way or the other today.
Okay.
I appreciate that. On the other hand, we're going to talk to council in July. We have one more meeting before that, and I don't think we can leave these particular questions unanswered. And so if you can give us your leanings, I think we've got your R4, we got that. But the using the halo when it abuts a UGB and using the halo when R3 abuts R4, which way would you lean on that?
I would let the halo be the 5 or whatever rule that we create. It doesn't matter whether there's a beach behind me or an R4 behind me or a commercial behind me or whatever. The fact is, there's going to be a certain natural movements of people, like on the beach. I mean, people want to be on the beach, and quite frankly, values of some of the homes go up because it's available for an STR potentially. So, I mean, there's lots of pluses and minuses. And yes, the one person on the beach that is there wants to, when they go there to the beach, they want to be quiet and nobody else around them. And I understand that. But you know what? That's not reality when you're living in a resort town where people come to for a particular reason. So anyway, I would stick with, it doesn't matter what's behind me, in front of me. It's, here's the 5. And then we can always relook at it. This is not set in stone, depending on what happens.
Okay. I think that the 2 items that we really have, I think to me, I think we agree on some of the basics, which is the big circle when it comes to the UGB and the R3, R4 border, to let the zone classification, as Phil puts it, speak to us when we say, and therefore we're not going to do the proximity halo with a STR in the R4 or the C1 or the L1, which leaves us with, what do we do with the opposite halo when it's the ocean, the park? Carol suggests.
Cheryl.
Sorry. Cheryl suggests.
It's all right.
Adding 1 STR, which is kind of the same as saying the bigger homes should also be counted as 2. It's just adding, it's kind of adding that factor into it. And I think both things could be done. I'm wondering if both things should be done. I'm thinking of the beach homes. Some of those largest homes are the beachfront homes. So you're adding 2 because they're the big homes.
Right.
And then you're adding another one
So,
because it's in the ocean.
and I think that's a good point. And I was thinking after I said that, when we looked at the map, the Halo software, most of our front homes are not STRs. It's the house one
Right.
one back.
Right.
So maybe, after I said it, I'm recanting it, maybe if we look closer at it, we're gonna see that if down the road we do something with big houses and the point scale, that would take care of what I was thinking about. What I'm just trying to do is get ahead of inadvertently creating clusters somewhere we don't mean to create.
And I think, Patrick, you've looked at the map a lot as well. In my recollection, and I don't want to take the time to bring it up, but in my recollection, when I did the halos on the beachfront or one-off homes, it really wasn't, it didn't matter. It really didn't matter because, as you said, most of them are one-off. They're not on the beach.
Right.
I think we can look at it again, but I think it really isn't a problem now because of where they are, then.
And perhaps the
then maybe we don't
safeguard
worry
will
about it.
be the mega homes or the point system down the road.
And that'll also be the occupancy discussion.
Right, exactly.
Right, after
So
July.
maybe not.
Yeah.
And I don't know what people think about the park. I don't know how that works. I mean, I think we ought to do some more looking into that, if that's gonna impact things. I know they are building park employee housing.
Again, the houses near the park are really in the UGB. So it's not.
Yeah, I think they are.
On my side of the street?
Yeah.
No, go all the way, we go
When
all the way
does-
down.
So where does
It's across the street.
Oh, okay.
On it,
Yeah.
those parks in the UGB on, I don't even know the name of the street, but if you went straight down New Kearney,
Spindrift.
is that the name of it? I don't know. Straight down New Kearney to the dead end, on the beach side, I believe those are all city homes.
Right.
Okay.
So
Right,
that's
right, you're right.
primarily,
Yeah,
it's
the
that
park.
six
And
block area.
I just, to
I don't
me,
know.
it complicates it when it doesn't have to. A circle's a circle is a circle.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And easiest people to understand.
Phil?
Comment on the state park. I think it makes a difference as to how the state park adjoins your property. In other words, do we have camping spots right across the street from you, or is there tree buffer?
That's a good point.
Do we have a parking lot,
Yeah.
or is
Yeah.
there a tree buffer? Do we have extracurricular activities that will create noise, or is there a
Mhm.
buffer? So we can put all of that off to the side. We don't have to just determine state park right now,
Okay.
but there are
Yeah.
a number of different things to consider.
And I think that's a really good point, because one of the things that made me think of this is I looked at the long-range plan for the state park. And there are, I don't know where they are in actually implementing it, but they are putting in campgrounds in addition to staff housing that will be
Closer.
That
I
they
think
are
it's so
closed.
that, yeah.
not that much,
Yeah.
because now they're redoing it, and I think that's what sparked me, because it's going to, it's not like it's a green space that's not occupied anymore. They're putting in 6 or 7 employee housing units, then behind that is another yurt development,
Mhm.
and then behind that, which would be accessible from Neocarny
But if you
Boulevard
do
and
something-
across the
If you
street.
do something for the park, special and just not saying it's here's a circle, do you have to do something special for the golf course? Do you have to do something special for the city park? Do you have to do something special for,
No, I don't
you know,
necessarily.
well, I think it's the same thing. You just, you'd have to say,
We're creating a lot of questions by doing it that way. And it creates a lot of needs for multiple exemptions rather than kind of a simple measurement.
Let's see what happens.
Okay.
You know, let's look. And if it does become a critical issue, then we'll pick that
Okay,
up.
all right, I just was mindful
Yeah.
of that.
And
Yeah, no, I
our
agree.
primary goal is to break up these clusters.
right,
Right.
Right, and if, one of the things that I worry about is in the R4 zone, remember the 6 houses that were built right behind the
yeah.
Wild?
Mhm.
5 of those 6 houses are STRs,
Correct,
so that's
Can I
a
speak
big,
on that?
yeah.
So,
yeah,
so real quick to Carol's point, and I think this is an important point, and I'll probably get outvoted on this, but I'm gonna support Carol on this one. And before I do, I just want to take a step back and summarize where we've come to. Number one, it sounds like we have an agreement that there's a halo around a house that we can come to terms with. 5 is a good number for that. Number 2, it sounds like we're counting everything in that halo, whether that's UGB, park, beach, etc. And in that halo, if you're in an R2 or you're in an R3, you're counting everything around it, which could include any house that's in a C1 and all those things. But we've also agreed that if you're applying in this for something in C1 or LC, there's no halo. We don't have a neighborhood control. We don't need one because we're allowing it to go unlimited. Now, and we can come back on that if there are any disagreements on that for sure. But on this R4, I'm just going to say this, and I totally respect Bill and everybody's point about, hey, it's zoned this way. And I agree that it's zoned that way, but it's zoned that way to build certain buildings. And we're never going to change that zoning. We don't have to worry about that. We're not a zoning group, but we are a group tasked with consideration for livability in residential areas. R4 is a residential area. And I'll just say this, the second thing coming is middle housing. And we're going to be forced or encouraged to help by using middle housing, which is duplexes, triplexes, quads, and they're going to be in R4. We're going to have a lot more housing unit capacity in those areas. And this is a great time potentially to say R4 is a place where we don't have to have, and we shouldn't have, unlimited STRs when we're trying to create workforce housing through middle housing and something like that. So I would just say keep zoning the same, but consider livability in R4 in the same way that we consider it with R3 and R2. And what I mean by that is consider a 5-house halo with R4 in addition to our other regions, while never needing a halo in LC and C1. If you apply in LC and C1, you go for it. In every other place, we consider livability, and 5 is pretty reasonable. So we just want to make sure we're not getting this one place in town, getting way over these amounts. We're creating a process to control these potential clusters or existing ones.
Phil, do you have the definition of R4?
I'll find it. It's gonna.
Okay.
It is
the
higher
buff-
density.
It's higher density, but I believe before it
Yeah, I
mentioned
wanna
the
see,
buffer
yeah,
zone.
yeah. Michael, how do you feel about that? Cause you live in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I go back and forth on this, as I did with commercial too. I mean, it's where you expect a higher intensity of use, but that doesn't mean we expect it to be all STRs, right? And as in as much as a proximity policy addresses, has potential to address specific livability issues around noise and parking, all that stuff. I think the big picture is like balance of neighborhood, like uses within a neighborhood. I would not like to see, despite the term higher intensity of use, I would not like to see an entire row of STRs on a block, because I want to see a mix of second homes, maybe somebody who lives here all the time. If you look at what's allowed outright or what's allowed, permitted, or outright in R4, there's some home office type, accountant, dentist type of stuff, the things that you start to see in neighborhood commercial. And then also, like actual bed and breakfasts. So I could be, I think it's reasonable to suggest that, despite higher intensity of use, that doesn't mean a free for all for STRs. And so if we want to include a 5 STR per catchment area type of policy and apply that to R4, I think that's fine.
Okay. You got that? Can you read the definition?
It's not simple.
Yeah, of course not.
Okay. So what it does is it says permitted outright uses. One family dwelling, two family dwelling, multifamily dwelling with no more than 4 dwelling units, home occupation, park and publicly owned recreation area, and the residential home, residential facility, and adult foster home. Short-term rentals subject to the restriction of section 6.03. Conditional use permits, church or community meeting hall, government structure, parking lots, schools and daycare centers, motels, hotels, and tourist courts, personal or business service establishments, and then it goes on from here. But I mean, it's,
Okay.
and I always looked at the R4 as a buffer between the C1 and the R3.
Right.
So in many ways, I agree with Patrick, but I also agree with Michael, the fact that we should be perhaps pulling back a little bit on the R4 and putting in a modified halo or something that would work with regards to curtailing the amount of activity. Because there are a lot of people who will gravitate to an R4 simply because of the proximity to town. And essentially what we've said is, okay, without any restrictions, we're gonna go commercial and we're gonna go STRs, and I'm sorry, the rest of you folks, no. So unless somebody develops a project commercially for those folks.
Okay, so Patrick and Michael, you're both saying that you would favor a proximity, the same proximity limitation or a proximity limitation?
I would say at a minimum, a proximity limitation. And I think, it's kind of like the beach neighborhoods, right? You have those clusters are appearing there, as you see in R4. And 5 per the catchment area is, at least what I hear everybody say is kind of the limit that we're looking at right now. That's the one that we're kind of gravitating to. Not saying that we want, whatever that percentage ends up being, 25 or 30 citywide. Obviously not. We have either a fixed cap or a percentage limit that brings it much lower than that. But what this does is tell us that that's at a street level, that's the upper bound for us. And I think 5 per catchment area works.
Yeah, I think we are too, but I just want to, Anupam?
I guess I stick with what my original concept was, leave the existing R4s and C1 the way they are, not have any new rules. I also, again, I want to be careful about the rationale for, I think Patrick, I agree with you, Patrick, in terms of middle housing and stuff like that. I think that's wonderful. But at the same time, we're not here to make public policy. And we need to be careful again about where our goal on the short-term rental committee is to look at how do we manage short-term rentals, the numbers as well as the usage in the city of Manzanita to maximize livability. If the council wants to change the zoning to exclude or allow more middle housing and do other things, fine. That's up to the council to make those decisions. But we should not make our decisions based on what we think the public policy should be.
Okay.
That's
If you don't mind, I'd like to respond to that. So I absolutely agree with you, Anupam, and I would say that we're not making decisions based on public policy, and we're not making decisions to influence public policy. These are decisions that recognize that public policy is going to allow growth in R4 of building, and we're accepting that. We're accepting the fact that there will be more duplexes, there will be more triplexes, there will be more quads to help with middle housing, to help with workforce housing. We accept that. So what I'm doing, what I'm trying to do is, as a number of houses grow within R4, the number of units grow within R4, I'm trying to honor what our task was, which was in every residential area, our STRs a potential burden, our STRs, our levels of STRs allowing for livability. So as more units are being built in those R4 strips, which is brand new, I think we have an opportunity to say, which is not about building codes or anything, it's about short-term rentals exclusively. Does it make sense to have unlimited short-term rentals fill these new spaces? Or does it make sense to have a rule that says, as more spaces open up in the R4, does a halo make sense? And a reasonable halo.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful about these concepts of, we've heard this thing before about we will be flooded with STRs all over the city. The fact is, any of these places, people will make the right economic decisions. And they may build houses, middle housing or whatever housing they want out there. But there's no saying that in the future, some of them may want to convert, some of them will do differently. But each one will be an individual piece. Again, I don't have enough data or information to, I guess, approach it one way or the other. And I don't want to sort of make a decision here that influences or changes or adopts a, I guess, policy essentially. There's no way around it if we say, okay, we're going R4, we're going to do this. What we're saying is we don't want this here, so it's going to be different from the current zoning rules. So that's all I'm saying, Patrick. I think middle housing will be there, Manzanita. It will come, and it has to come. I think it's important. As you all know, there's a whole NIMBY effect out there also about workforce housing. I love it, but not in my neighborhood kind of stuff. So, we'll have that conversation separately on that whole issue.
Yeah, and I think that's where we start getting into stuff that's not ours, but I agree with Patrick. We're not trying to change zoning, and that's why I had Phil read what the zoning is for that area, and it is high-density residential. In high-density residential, it is in our purview to say, should we limit the proximity of STRs in the same way as we limit the proximity in low-density residential? I think that's all we're saying. We're not saying change the zoning. We're just saying,
Right.
of
That's right.
SDRs, should it be, have the same limitations or should it not?
Well, and I think what I was looking at was from the perspective of the R3 people. That for that halo to include the R4,
Mhm.
because it's when at the ordinance, it is kind of that buffer zone from commercial to high density into R3. And so I think that the halo would be.
I think the halo, I think we've
Appropriate idea.
all agreed that the halo should include it, but should R4 have a halo if you want to build an SDR in R4? Should it not? I think that's what, and Patrick.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yes.
And Patrick, yeah. If you
And I'm
wanna-
saying yes.
And you're saying yes?
Yeah.
And I will say
Me
yes
too.
to that.
I am too.
And, you know, for me, when I walk up Manzanita Avenue, or if I walk up Laurel, those are R4 on one side of the street. That's a residential neighborhood. I mean, I understand it's a buffer and you could
Mhm.
have a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, but it's still a residential neighborhood. So, yeah, it should have the same proximity. I think right now, by the way, and I think, Anupam, this is where your more information comes in. I would strongly urge you to look at, Brian's map if you have not done so, because it shows where all the STRs in town are. Currently, R4 has about a 20, I think it's 27, 28% density. It's of STRs to homes. It's a pretty dense area in terms of STRs. And we're not saying it should be more than that. We're not saying it should be less than that. We're just saying that it shouldn't become more than that.
Mhm. It should
And
be
that's what the
integrated.
proximity would be. So I'd go along with that too.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I'm sorry, Carol, may I jump in and then I'll,
I'll say my point.
thank you. Just quick question, comment. So if we do the R4 density, since R4 borders C1,
Uh-huh.
will an STR in C1 count in the 5
Yes,
Yes,
limit?
yes.
because it would just be part of a circle. You just do a circle's a circle. By the way, there are 8 STRs right now in the C1 zone
Mhm.
because there aren't that many opportunities
that
for
many.
houses.
Right. Okay, so my point was gonna be and I live across, Dorcas is the dividing line. And so I live right across the street from the R4, and there are some lovely long-term rentals, small but very nice. It would be an excellent area to develop small apartment buildings for our workforce housing that would be in that vibrant community. It's also, I love the idea of some kind of elder care unit or something like that. And if we, again, it's the same thing, if we fill up our R4 zone with STRs, where do those higher density needs, how are those met?
That's a good.
Yeah, and so you need to keep that blend of housing opportunities is my thinking.
Who hasn't chimed in here?
So explain to me where we are right now. What is?
So far, we have agreed that a circle's a circle, whether it's a UGB on one side, a park on one side,
Or the C1 zone.
or the C1 zone or the R4 zone, a circle is a circle. So if you live in R3, your circle would include R4.
Okay,
If you live where Cheryl lives, your circle would include the UGBs across the road from you. I think we've agreed on that. We've agreed, that the C1 should be unregulated. So I think that,
And
And
LC.
LC1,
Well, not unregulated, just.
they can, yeah, right. But the question that is left is
The R4.
R4, should that have the halo and the 5 homes or not? And I think where we're leaning right now, is yes, it should still have the it should still have the density
Mhm.
halo restriction.
Okay.
For
Which wouldn't-
STRs.
For
For
STR,
Nothing else,
nothing else.
nothing else.
Right.
which
The
wouldn't,
zone would still apply.
there
The
are,
zoning
yeah,
would still
and there
apply.
are maybe 2 cluster areas that through attrition would have to come down. But most of the rest of R4 currently would be okay. I mean, we wouldn't be losing a whole lot of SDRs.
Okay,
No, I don't think.
But there would be a couple, just as there are a couple on Manzanita Avenue and there's a couple on Windward. Yeah, and, you know, there are a couple areas in town that there's probably like 6
Mhm.
that have more than 5 in the cluster.
Yeah, there aren't very
But
many.
not a ton, but what it does is prevent it from R4 when we do add denser housing to be totally.
that makes
So,
sense.
and that makes sense, yeah.
I think so.
And it still falls within the definition of what the R4 zone is.
I don't think you should go contrary to zoning regulations.
No.
Right.
No.
But I don't think we are.
You want a can of worms.
Yeah,
No, but
I don't think we are.
by including it, we are interpreting the zoning as a mixed use.
Okay.
Again, these will just things that the council will make the final decision on.
I'm hoping that we conclude this discussion, everybody, because I have one more thing that I need to bring up.
Okay, I think the
It
only,
hasn't been discussed.
okay,
Uh-oh, right, uh-oh.
It's gonna be easy, based on what we've already done. It's gonna be
Okay,
easy.
so hold your horses until we get.
Okay, don't
Well, that's why I
panic.
wanna see if we
That's
get consensus.
do we have, is there anybody that strongly feels that they can't deal with that? I think Anupam, you're the only outlier at this point.
No, I can support this, with the understanding, as we all have, is this is, let's call it a trial balloon. We're gonna give it a period of time and let's work out the kinks as we go through and see what changes we need to make over time. And that's fine. That's fair
Okay.
enough.
And then just real quickly and, well, I'll skip yours first and then I'll do the other, what that means for other things, but go ahead, Phil.
Okay, we haven't talked about SRR.
Right.
That's because SRR is the zone that surrounds the golf course,
Correct. And
which
it's-
allows commercial.
Right, but it's also SRR across the road,
The Highlands,
correct?
some of it, yeah.
And it could be even more.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if you don't want to establish the halo principle within the SRR zone.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
It just hasn't been brought up. That's.
No, I think it hasn't been brought up because I think we all think of the SRR zone along with the R2 zone.
Yeah, but it's not.
I know, it's a different zone, but it's a zone in
Well,
Manzanita.
but it answers your question with regards to the golf course.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in,
Can I just phrase this, maybe help with the phrasing of this? The zone will never matter about a halo. The zone just determines whether you count 5 houses or not. And you count it everywhere so far, except if your SRR is going into an LC or C1 area. That's the only time the zone really matters because you're almost like blocking out zones as you put your halo in and you're counting everything in that halo around an applicant for a new short-term rental. And over time, that breaks up the clusters. But the only time that a zone really matters is if the only time that something changes is if somebody's got an STR application for C1 or LC, because then you basically don't have a halo. They get an automatic pass. They get an automatic SRR. But if we're in agreement that R4 livability in R4 is a reasonable thing to consider for short-term rentals, then basically the same rule applies outside of C1 and R or L1 for the halo. That's my understanding of what we've come to.
Good.
yeah, I think that we have. Does that answer your question? That, yeah. Some of the things that we can take care of very quickly now. HOAs. If the main argument against HOAs was counting HOAs, if we choose to do a percentage, is that if the HOA says you can't build, you can't have STRs here, they're gonna end up clustering elsewhere. Well, we've taken care of the clusters. We won't have clusters of more than 5 in a circle, and so therefore, trying to worry about HOAs, trying to worry about HOAs that are a duplex or threeplex or fourplex, we don't have to worry about it because it's no longer gonna cause a cluster elsewhere because we've got a program in place that'll prevent the clusters. Is that? That can,
I
I'm
agree.
sure.
Well, I don't, I don't think there's some redundancy there. I don't think it's bad policy to have, other than the fact that it would take time to write the policy around HOAs and take time to track them, which other than the initial lift, I don't think is a hardship, but I'm not city staff that would be doing it. So I'll leave that for them to weigh in on. And I would agree that the cluster policy, proximity policy, addresses that level of concentration. Should HOAs not be removed, and it gets dispersed somewhere, but the proximity policy prevents it from being dispersed at that street level. I would still say though, at a neighborhood, and I know we're not there yet, and that'll come perhaps never come, is whether or not we look at, because we have a citywide license cap, we have a street level proximity, and then the other thing that could potentially be implemented is a neighborhood one, which I'm not pushing for at this time, but I do think that there might, when we reevaluate these policies 3 years down the road or whatever that date is, I think it would be important, based on whatever the survey results are at that time, to say, do we need to develop something that's a neighborhood based, density policy? And the reason why I say that, and maybe this is where the HOA thing falls under too, is that at that time, you look to see if there's been an effect, because I do feel that if you don't take out HOAs and there becomes something like a Highlands level of development that has a couple hundred homes in it that decides to say, we don't want STRs, then what do you do? And because we have policy to prevent a cluster, but we don't have policy to stave, those homes from going all in the beach neighborhood or going all in R4, So I just want to bring it up just because I'd be remiss not to. But if we're going to park it down the road to do something about the HOAs, I wouldn't write it off totally and say that, hey, we've addressed it. I still think that there's a policy out there, but whether or not it needs to be a near-term priority for this group to implement that policy, I don't think we need to, but I wouldn't just write it off all around. I'd probably park it in something to be evaluated at year 3 or something like that.
That's fair. Yeah. Because I think you never write anything off the table permanently, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Actually, real quick, as a caveat to that, I would also be careful about trying to measure it. If you do a survey in 2 years, this is like a 5-year process because it takes attrition, it takes sales of houses, it takes giving up MCA licenses. So this is a long-term policy and medium to long-term policy, and its effects will not be felt in the first 1 to 3 years. So we have to keep that in mind. Like this is the beginning of an important process, but it doesn't fix anything right away. It fixes things over time. And so be careful when a survey comes back and goes, hey, things are the same way they were in 2024. That will be true for a while, and that's okay because this is a long-term thing that protects us, from worst case scenarios in the future.
By the way, I don't know how many of you listened to the planning commission meeting on Monday. I know Phil did. The development that is being planned for 3rd Street, the question came up, they're going to be small homes, 650 square feet.
Ooh.
And the ones on the perimeter are going to have garages, but the ones in the middle are not, and they're going to have non-designated parking places. And so the question came up, are you going to allow STRs? And the developer said something that I questioned, and so I checked with Leila and I was wrong. But what the developer said was, because they don't have dedicated parking spaces at their house, they don't have driveways, they don't have dedicated spaces off-street for their house. Therefore, they will not qualify to be STRs, the inner ones, the ones that don't have driveways, because
Yeah,
in the STR parking, it
Right.
says you have to have two designated off-street spaces. And the off-street parking spaces that they will have are not designated. And so, so they can't be STR. So I thought, well, gee, if they've got, anybody can park on these off-street spaces and they have a house, well, isn't that a parking space? The answer is no.
yeah.
So the ones with garages could be STRs, but the inner ones cannot.
And they will have two, it'll be, each one will have two parking spaces?
Well, they'll have a
on the
garage, so
perimeter?
they'll have a garage.
The outside.
Oh, a garage and then one.
And the perimeter houses have a
Parking,
garage
a
and
driveway
a
parking.
driveway, yeah.
The
So,
inner ones
Okay.
have shared parking, 15 spaces.
Mhm.
I will only bring up to you the fact that the parking regulations could be changed,
Sure.
in which case then
Then they could be STRs, but there would still be.
You know,
Proximity
I-
halo.
So I think, Phil's right, but lots of things could happen.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that the council and planning commission will have to take into account. Were it to happen.
we don't, it's already set in stone.
How many,
Well, except you folks have to decide as to
so
whether
there's
it's.
15 parking places for 20?
You mean the 2 parking places per short-term rental?
The
No,
ones on
I'm
the
talking
outside,
about
yeah.
the fact that the
Driveway.
possibility, we're digressing here.
Yeah, okay,
We don't need to do that.
okay, okay.
I have a question, and it's probably, how many interior homes? You said there's 27 parking places? Are there
There are 26 homes total.
total?
Good.
There are 11 homes that are considered, they have 2 parking spaces. They have one in the garage and they have one in the driveway.
Okay,
Okay, the remainder are the smaller cluster cabins
Mhm.
supposedly,
15.
and they have a single parking space
per unit.
per unit.
And because they're small, they've become more affordable, which I mean,
They are very
I am
small.
so supportive
Yeah,
of
but
that.
the interesting thing was that they had no information at all as to what price point those were going to
Sure.
be
Yeah,
offered at.
yeah,
Which,
I think 900,000 is a fair price, right?
yeah, right.
That's what.
Sorry,
Small
just getting
house,
off track
good
here.
price for a starter LDR.
Okay. Occupancy,
There was just one sold.
occupancy we'll get to at a
Wow.
later date after July. Occupancy we'll talk about after July. And that, because that's a big complicated issue. And that's, that gets into how many people in the home, it gets into whether it's a dead end street, it gets into, we'll talk about that after. UGBs, at some point, they will be incorporated into the city. Maybe it's 40 years, maybe it's 2 years. If it's the Highlands, it's like a little section a year. There should be a policy about incorporating UGBs into the city in terms of STRs. We can't get to it
Oh,
before
there's no
July.
way.
We can't get to it before July, but it's just
No.
something that should be on our.
Well,
Along with,
and I would refer you back to what the zoning is for those areas that are gonna be incorporated, if they're
Right.
gonna
Oh,
be
right.
incorporated.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Sure.
Because that will help lead you, and you won't have to develop new policy, it'll actually partly be set for you.
Right,
But
But-
it's nice that you have taken the step for the homes that adjoin
Yeah.
or abut.
yeah.
right,
Or
right.
you already are thinking about it, so it's just,
So,
Right.
Joe, I know you're doing this, but I think there is gonna be a transition in this team. And having a parking lot with all of those issues on it, so they don't get lost in
Yeah.
that transition, I think is gonna be really important.
Yeah, and then other ones, that we'll look at are, revisiting the fines and the violations regarding renter pets and the same partner, multiple license loophole. They're minor things, but we'll get to them, eventually. We'll change the language in the ordinance to ensure that the STR sign is readable from the street. We'll change the dark sky paragraph in 10.3 to reflect the new dark sky
Right.
ordinance.
Right.
And then the last, ADUs. We concur, we've decided as a group that we concur with the planning commission's report from 2021 that says an ADU can't be a short-term rental, and the house on the property can also not be a short-term rental.
Sweet.
Oh, okay.
So more long-term housing.
Yeah,
Okay.
because that was what the
Yeah.
planning commission
Yeah.
said, if you have an ADU, you could move into the ADU and then rent your house, and that's not the point of an ADU.
Yeah, right.
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 The other issue that we have dropped is the idea of the 3 strikes and you're out, which there hasn't really been anybody with 3 complaints, but I remember we talked about that early on with this committee.
And I can't remember where we are right now.
We did, we've never picked it up, I don't think, have we, Joe?
No, we haven't. The city council talked about it and decided that until we had a couple years worth of code enforcement officer
Input.
input,
Okay.
it shouldn't be considered.
Okay, so it's
Well,
been.
and also documentation.
And documentation,
Yeah.
because
Because
we
we
just didn't have it.
Yeah, we didn't
Yeah.
have.
I mean, we didn't have-
documentation.
We didn't have anybody who had more than 2 complaints in the last, 10 years. It wasn't a thing. So how
Yeah.
do you make, you're solving a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah, so on that point, Mike kind of missed a glitch here because there is a quarterly report that is due now, and we talked about having Max come. Timing is just not good, but they have committed to each month during the summer to come back to the short-term rental.
Oh, okay.
So that we will have
Update.
an update each month because that's our busiest season and that's when we need that data. But Joe's right, up until now, there really hasn't been any major issue, at least that I know.
I just wanted it to stay on the parking list
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
if it's.
Yeah.
if you're doing-
Yeah, but I think that's a parking list for 3 years.
Well, yeah, but we don't.
But you
wanna
should still
lose
have
these
it,
things.
yeah.
Yeah,
The one other thing I think that I know that we haven't considered, we've got all the proximity stuff worked out, except to go back to your estate home being counted as 2. And do we want to do that? Do we not want to do that? And what is an estate home? I will tell you that if you go down to 4, you're gonna count half the homes
That's
in
too small,
Manzanita. It's
right.
too small.
I thought your idea that you proposed at our last meeting was great.
So.
Over
What was I saying?
12 or over 16 or whatever, it was another town was using that as a maxi house.
Well, they said it 5 bedrooms or more. And so 5 bedrooms for us would be
10 plus
over 14.
Well-
So 15 or more.
But I think what we
Put that on
talked,
put that on the bucket list.
No,
No.
no, I think I think that's gonna be important.
I do too, and I think what we talked about last time was making a recommendation about that ordinance of the +4.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's
That's
so it-
different. Those are 2 different issues, though.
occupancy, but what I'm talking about is when we're talking about the proximity halo and we're counting 5,
I know.
do we count a 5 bedroom or more home
As 2.
as 2,
As
or do
2
we
dots.
count it as 1? That's the question. Patrick is clearly on the side of no.
Joe, maybe
I think we have to control that separately, and occupancy will come at a different moment. And to make proximity work, I think we have to keep it simple and test it for a while and see if it does work.
2 dots is simple. That's a simple way to handle those maxi houses,
But what is the maxi house?
5 or more,
5 bedrooms or more, so it'd be 14 people.
or 15, it would be 50,
14.
yeah,
10.
14 is a lot of houses.
14 people
I know,
in a house.
I know,
That's a lot of people
Is
in one
that a
house.
5-bedroom, 14?
that's a, yeah,
10,
14.
4.
I have to go back to the, I
How
don't have
many?
it in front of me, but I can get it, if, the number of homes that have 14 or more, I think it's a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But
So that
but on
was
the other, 14 is a lot of people, and that,
And a lot of
and a lot of
cars,
cars, and a lot of.
wagons, and a lot of dogs.
Just a lot of stuff, so.
So how many
I
homes
just-
do we have in Manzanita that are 5 bedrooms or more? Do we
I'm
know?
gonna
Joe's
Yeah.
booting up her computer.
I can't tell you how many homes, I can tell you how many STRs.
Yeah,
I'm just curious, how many homes are in Manzanita have 5 bedrooms or more?
She's
We're
looking
looking
up, we're looking it
Who
up,
knows?
STR homes.
We can't even tell you how many homes there are in Manzanita, so we certainly
Yeah.
can't tell you how many homes have 5 bedrooms or more.
I had a quick suggestion. So wherever we land on this, you know, to resolve, because there was some question over, are we counting bedrooms or sleeping areas? You know, if we can maybe reverse engineer it a little bit and say, well, if five bedrooms is 14 people, I would just stick with the occupants, 14, and just let that be the policy versus trying to define bedrooms. It just seems like it's better for implementation.
You know, I would also add that when we start getting data from
Patrick,
Max over time. Oh, I'm sorry.
There is one home on Beach Street that has a maximum occupancy of 18.
It's a lot.
There are 3 homes with a maximum occupancy of 16. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
What did you say, 1, 3?
7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, so not that many. 10 homes that have 14.
So that's 14 and 14.
Okay, and they are on Sitka, Sandpiper, Beach,
14.
Beach, Ocean, Beach, Ocean, Horizon, 4th Street South, Merton, Ridge Drive. That would be the,
I can tell you the one by.
yeah, and Poisky Avenue.
For 14.
So basically beach and ocean. So how many is that total?
14.
so there are
14
14
homes.
with 14?
14 houses with the
14.
capacity to sleep 14 or more people. And one of them is by me. And there is no way they abide by the parking regulations because there's just not parking. So that's one thing. But I think 14 people in a house is a lot of people in a house. And I mean, I don't know, what is the con about having a classification of a mega home? Or I didn't call it what you will, but if a home has 14 or more people.
It's one of the city's largest revenue generators.
Right. But do you think more of those are gonna be built? I mean, because they could still be built in certain areas, right, if there weren't.
They absolutely could.
It wouldn't limit the number, it would just limit the proximity.
Yeah. I mean. Is it working
That's both.
where these are and seeing what kind of impact something like this would have? Because
Let's do that.
we don't have any data to know if this impacts the revenue in the city or not. I mean, just
Oh.
thinking.
It will. This will absolutely impact the revenue of the city for sure. I mean, we have to be, these are, this row of the 2 front rows along the beach are huge moneymakers for the city. These houses make houses probably make 5 figures on average for the city.
You don't know. All will be in all of the same halo. I think that's what she's saying.
I'm
Let's
talking
look
about
at
the
map.
halo.
Let's look at the map.
Let's look at the map and look at them with the halo to see. Just to see, because we don't have the information to know if it will impact. I'm not saying get rid of them or anything like that. I'm saying, let's just see if it matters on the Halo, what this looks like on our Halo idea. To get more data and information that's factual versus us all just sounding off on what we think.
And I think we can do that
too.
We can do
But
that
what's your
easily.
goal? I guess my question is, what's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? We're talking about big houses. What's the risk? What are we concerned about? And what's our goal with policy?
Talking about livability, and I'm talking about the city, the revenue. We are, I'll speak for myself. I may be assuming it's impacting livability because if there's too many, but I don't know if that's the case because I know where one is. And I think that if we have more data on where they are, it would help inform our decision either one way or the other. Because I'm not saying we won't have them, and I don't want to be in the position where I don't think we're saying don't have these ever. We're just saying we want them in a proximity, same as we've said with everything else. And I just think more concrete information versus just opinions and arguments right now would be useful.
Well
But
spoken.
then we have this information. So this information is in using Brian's map. We have where they are. And what Joe just did, we have the list of I think it's 16 houses or something like that. So we can easily look at that and you can check out the halos. But remember, no matter what we do with any of these policies, we cannot change where these places are right now until they sell their house or give up their MCA.
And I think, I don't think that's what
Nobody's
Cheryl,
disputing
she's
that.
just saying,
Nobody's disputing
let's
that.
look at it. And by the way, Brian's map, if you look at the if you click on the home and you look at the upper right hand, it's 10,
Wow.
14.
He's
8.
amazing.
Oh, it's right
That's a
there.
great
Yeah.
map.
It's so,
I would, quick
Sorry.
question, Joe.
Yeah, that's some homework.
I think Patrick asked a good question. What is our objective? And Cheryl, I'm sorry to pick on you, but I'm just going to use your example since you mentioned the house next to you, it was a large home. Okay, I couldn't hear you guys. What was that side joke? But let's say we do adopt this policy in the halo of counting two, and I might be fine with that. That's okay. But my question then, I guess, to the committee then is, how does that solve your livability? Will it solve livability? And then what do we need to do to help your livability in your circumstance? Because that house may still be there. There may not be others, but the other house will still be there.
I'll try to answer that. I think it gets back to what are we trying to do by putting a proximity halo in a neighborhood? And what we're trying to do is say there is an upper limit of what I will accept of short-term rentals in my neighborhood. And given that premise, okay, that's what we're trying to do. That's the problem we're trying to solve, is to say, I won't feel overrun if there's only 5 of them in my halo. That number of 5 is going to be very different if they're 1-bedroom homes or 6-bedroom homes. And so because that's a fact, I think we can all agree that's a fact. I'm going to feel a lot different if there's 6 bedrooms, or it gets back to what you were saying last month. Maybe we should count bedrooms, not homes. Except the idea of saying there's 36 bedrooms, it's just too scary. But because a bigger home has a larger footprint and a larger effect on traffic and noise and blah, 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 that maybe we should count those very large homes double, because they kind of have double the effect of a small home. That's all.
I completely understand, Joe, and I'm with you on that. No problem. I guess I was much more focused on and to just in Charles Street, let's say there's no more STRs built there. Okay, let's just say that. She still has a challenge with the house next to her. How are you helping her deal with that challenge?
Occupancy, and that's after July.
No, but still be a house, say 15 people.
Yeah.
So what I've been sort of pushing for is also we have to address also the whole, let's say, compliance issues and dealing with the parking that Cheryl's complained about. Maybe it's noise. I don't know whether it's dogs. let's deal with those, because all of this other stuff we're talking about, these are long-term issues. Maybe eventually we'll get to them. That's great. But we have to deal with Cheryl's frustrations today, and probably for the next couple of years, they'll continue to be that way if we don't do anything else.
But aren't we, Annabelle, I said, you've said that before, and now I'm gonna pick on you a little bit. Haven't we, in the past 4 years, put in a ton of stuff that helps with parking, noise,
Yeah,
lighting,
yeah.
education? Haven't we done that?
Code enforcement.
Code
I'll
enforcement?
ask Cheryl, is she happy?
Yes, I wasn't complaining at all because this house is down the street. I'm just thinking that when you have a house with 14 people coming and going, you have a lot more going on than a house with 6 people or 7 people even. So to me, when I think of that, because I have both on my street, the 14, that's a lot of space. That's a big footprint with 14 people, and nobody's doing anything wrong. And I don't have complaints about, they're not doing anything wrong but enjoying their beach day. But it's a lot of people. It's just like you could have 2 people over for dinner or 20 people. It's a different thing. So I think as we look, what we're trying to accomplish with this proximity halo is the management of the distribution. A large house like that maybe needs consideration, and I'm reserving not my vote, but I want to see where they are. I understand that people love them for family reunions, and I think it's a great thing to have available to people. But I think we have to maybe look at how they're managed. So because we go back to the survey with livability, with all the issues you just mentioned, but let's just get more information and see where they are.
I'm supportive of the higher, let's say dots, let's call it, whether there's 1.5 or 2, whatever, that's fine. I think that's a fair point. Yeah. So
we've got about 10 minutes and we've got some really important things we need to talk about. So I will do that map and I'll do some screenshots, and then we will know where are those homes. Do we care? Don't we care? I mean, it's an easy, I would ask that all of you look at Brian's map. You've all got the link.
Yeah.
And look for yourself, but I'll do some screenshots of those homes and we can make a decision. We need to start writing the presentation. We've got the original old draft, that big long thing.
Yeah.
I think that is kind of good as backup, but we need to somehow cut it in half. The presentation, I think we need to make this presentation in 20 minutes, half an hour, how long?
The longer the presentation, you lose the council.
Yeah, exactly.
15, we can do it we can do a 10 to 15 presentation.
And then the discussion. So we need to put together our 15-minute, it's a very long elevator. We're going up to the top of the World Trade Center. But we need the elevator
not a
presentation.
good example to use, but go ahead.
So we need to get going on that. If you want to be involved with that, or if you, probably a better question is if you don't want to be involved with that, if you want to let it go to other people, let me know, and we need to get started on that. Any comments on as an individual? Do you want to help with it? Do you not want to help with it? How do you want to? Offline. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
What's the date?
Just one clarification, Joe.
It's
What is our recommendation on the citywide cap versus percentage, or where are we on that? I'm not sure we concluded anything, at least I didn't, so.
We're giving them 3 options. That's probably why you didn't know what we concluded. So the 3 options, either, in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did not come up with a number.
Okay.
Will we?
And we're not making a specific recommendation. We're saying these are the 3 choices.
Yeah.
We're not coming up with a number?
Well, we hadn't come up with a number when he says we didn't come up with a number.
yeah.
So let me the 3 options were a number. The current number is 263, by the way. a percentage, 17.5%, and then a percentage, 17.5 with a 1% cap triggering a review by council. So 15 more homes after 263. So a trigger as soon as the STRs get to 278, that would trigger a review by council and the STR committee. So those 17.5 just grows, no cap, 17.5 with that 278 review by council, a hard cap. Let's talk about the number in just a sec. Any one of those three would be reviewed in a year anyway. And then if it seems to be going okay, then we would recommend a 3 to 5 year review. Okay.
And at this point, the STRs in the C1 and R4, are they included in the cap or they're not included in those numbers?
We talked about, I think we've all agreed also that they should be, the C1 and LC1 and R4 are not included in the freeze, which is 230. But they are included in the total number of STRs, which is 263. And we have agreed as a committee that whatever we determine will be a total number based off the 263 or the 17.5% citywide, not dividing it out, not dividing C1 out.
Right.
Okay, so the cap number, it's 263 right now. Does anybody have a opinion on what we should suggest as a hard cap? We've
Just for myself, I'm
65.
going to go back and review some of the material and I'll come back to you because I don't remember what the numbers were. 17.5. I assume 17.5 excludes the C1 and R4s.
Not 17.5 includes the C1 R4. It's currently at about 18%. And we could, and to increase it is going to get people mad for 0.5%. It's not worth it.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
17.5%.
Is that the 278 number?
No, 263 is 17.5%.
Oh, okay.
Haven't we just,
The 278 would be the 1% over that would trigger an automatic review by council.
Okay.
Yeah.
have we impacted the numbers by incorporating the UGBs into the halos?
Mhm.
No, because they don't, it wouldn't.
No,
Yeah,
no, okay.
no.
I think that's.
If you're looking for a starting point,
Yeah,
do people, if there's three options, if one of those three options was a fixed number and we started close to where we are, we rounded it up to 265, do people think that's too high or too low or what?
Where are we now
we're at 263 right now. I mean, next week we could be 265.
Right.
But right now we're 263.
Mhm.
So what we're saying is, should we keep it exactly at the level it is when the council determines?
It seems to be a good balancing point, and we've made those cases many, many times. So that's an idea.
Anybody feel that it should be other than exactly what it is when the council puts this into effect? Higher, lower?
So this is gonna be a long process.
Yeah,
I think you need a number. I don't think you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay. So we know that 263 is
I'm gonna offer a
about,
second option, and I'm gonna offer a second option, just to be on the record, to say 260, which actually shows that we're kind of listening to the minority and saying, we have an option that kind of hold us where we are for a while and says we have an acceptable range that covers the needs of the city and is starting to work toward an emphasis on livability rather than growth. And anyway, that's just one idea. I'm 50-50 on that versus the 265. I would do either. And I would listen to anybody else's ideas.
Let me make a comment on that. The council is going to be dealing with two issues, one livability and one financial. And I would suggest that you don't want to diminish that financial impact. And I mean, even though that sounds a little bit smaller, I think I would caution you
Right.
about that.
I would suggest I mean, my vote would be personally is to, again, you've heard this before, 17.5, retain this percentage. Because I'm also thinking if, who knows, if we do bring in some UGBs or other parts of expand the city, you will need to provide services to those areas. And there's a cost to those services. And to the extent there can be an additional STR or something bringing in revenues to provide that, that's helpful. So I wouldn't cut that out.
Just one sec, because I think we are gonna give them all three options, and one will.
17 and a half.
Oh, you're kidding me.
That one's still going.
Are you still with us, Anupam, can you hear me?
Take your.
Yes, I can.
All right, good, all right, one will be the.
We're good, turn it back.
Okay, one will be the 17.5%, but the question right now is, one of the options will be a hard cap. And so what would that hard cap number be? Patrick says 260, just to say we've gone down.
Let's just say 265 so we don't have any budget issues.
Okay, 265. I would say if we have a hard cap, we know that there are gonna be probably at least 50 to 100 homes built in the next 2 years with the Highlands and this Third Street one. And so that translates to somewhere between 10 and 17 homes. If we, SDRs. So if we know that if we kept it at 17.5%, we would grow another 10 to 17, that maybe the cap should take that into account and say, all right, let's add 15 to 265 and take it to 80. That's another option.
For the hard cap.
So other
I'd be more supportive of
that
that.
option, given that rationale, and I think that's a good suggestion, Joe, that approach, and say, this is one other option, or you can stick with 17.5, or you could stick with some other model out there.
Yeah, forget the 17.5 just for a minute.
That's.
If you had a hard cap, what's the hard cap number?
What about if we, since this is in effect for a year or two, right?
Mhm.
What if we said 275, because that allows for 10, so we're allowing for growth, but it's not gonna sound exponentially larger than maybe, and I think it's kind of a middle to 275.
And one caveat, I'll just remind us all of this, is that the UGB has 41 short-term rentals over time, whatever number we pick. Let's say let's say we pick 265. We're going to have 306 at some point if we keep the UGB levels the same. So I mean, we have room for growth because we will get, and by the way, at current rates, those 41 short-term rentals in the UGBs will bring us $245,000 extra dollars per year at least, right? So we already have, at whatever level we pick at a fixed rate, we have this buffer to go up, 41 to, as we incorporate the ones that are unincorporated over time. Not in the near term, but over time.
I'd be supportive of the 275. I think that's a good suggestion. That does not sound, we've got 263 today in total, and 275 is not unreasonable. And in any event, we're going to revisit everything. Plus, we're addressing let's call it the clustering through the halo effect. So, we're dealing with being responsible for revenue, but we're also being responsible for livability.
Patrick, I just want to say on the UGBs, if the UGBs are incorporated, then the city is going to have to come up with a method to incorporate that includes incorporating the STRs.
Right.
And how long have the UGBs been UGBs? 22 years? So I think to say they're going to be incorporated tomorrow or in the next.
That.
No, but I mean, it's something,
Minimum 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, no,
I don't-
but I think what the FOMO that we have as a group and as a community is, oh my gosh, all these things are going to change in the near future, and it's going to cost the city so much more money, and we're never going to have any money to pay for it. And I think the reality is that these changes happen over a longer period of time, incremental change, and we have a lot of different things in place to protect us over time. And so I totally respect everybody. I know that I'm in the minority on this, and that's okay. I'm just kind of sharing the perspectives I've heard from the community, which are in the minority, and I totally respect the decision as a majority of us that we all choose to make.
Can we live with 275, everybody?
I can.
Okay,
Yes.
it's easy. All right, we'll do a lot of stuff by email and online and get started with this 15-minute presentation. Look forward to your help, those of you who want to help.
We had tentatively.
Oh
set,
yeah, we tended, thank you,
A planning, kind of an informal planning meeting on the 7th.
on June 7th.
And then our next meeting will be on the 21st.
I can't make either one.
Oh, you can't?
You going someplace
Are you
fun?
going to?
No.
Oh,
Oh,
So
We'll
I'll
miss
try and make the 21st,
Okay.
by Zoom, but I can't.
well,
guarantee
the
it.
good news is I think the next two meetings are really gonna be all about the presentation,
Yeah,
which,
slide.
I mean, we've got our game plan and we just need to do which, you know, we
Okay.
don't need you.
Can we give a draft prepresentation on the 7th and see what people think about it?
Or on the 21st,
On the,
No.
our regular
If,
meeting. We
I
could
think
do-
we can,
you
The
have to
27th of May?
proximity.
yeah, we need to
June.
decide on the estate
Whether
house,
we
but
add
that's gonna be,
Two.
Well, so the
We can
next
do that.
meeting,
I think we
Okay.
By
pretty
email.
much did decide though, didn't we?
no.
I think we
we're-
did.
Look, we can do that by
No, we
email.
By looking at where,
yeah.
Yeah, let's see where we can get
Okay.
Patrick before the 7th, but yes, the 7th at 10 o'clock. Here and Zoom.
Okay.
and then the
'Cause Brad's gonna
21st,
teach me how to use this
and the 21st is our regular
meeting,
meeting
yeah.
from
Okay,
10 to 12.
anything
Yeah,
else?
I'm
Michael
loving it here.
Gardner,
So nice.
Leela,
Yeah.
anything for,
Really, to see
the-
everybody.
you want,
Yeah.
you said
Or
you to yourself,
observations.
why aren't they talking about this? No?
Going once?
Oh, here comes Michael.
Oh, good.
No, I'm good. I'm just here more for observation than anything else.
We
Okay.
appreciate it.
How about Leila? Does she have any comment?
I don't know. Mops, you got anything to say?
And happy birthday, by the way.
Everybody with my mother, a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Oh,
Birthday.
happy birthday, Leila.
To-
20th.
Oh,
Thank you all. I
Thank
think
you.
we're done. Okay, we'll be.
Hi.
Is there any way that we can dial the sound down a little bit? It's really piercing. It's
Thank you.